everyone, and welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're going to be diving into a topic that I know a lot of you have been requesting, and that's economic systems.
That's right.
And we've got a ton of great source material for this one from all of you.
It's true.
Articles and economic analyses, even some historical accounts.
Yeah, it's going to be a really fun one.
This could be like a crash course in economics.
Mm-hmm.
So to get us started, I was looking through all the source material, and it seems like there are a few things that you are all really curious about.
Yeah.
And one of them is just like the sheer variety of economic systems that exist out there.
Right. And how they differ from political systems.
Exactly.
Which can be confusing
Yeah.
because they're often talked about in the same breath.
Right, like they're kind of intertwined,
Yeah,
but they are different.
very much so.
So maybe let's just start with that. Like, have you ever wondered how different countries decide what to produce, how to produce it, and who gets the stuff in the end?
Yeah, that's essentially what an economic system is. It's a way of organizing all of that, the production, the distribution and consumption of goods and services.
So it's really like the framework that a society uses to figure out how to, deal with the fact that there's only so much stuff to go around.
Exactly.
And there are a lot of people who need it.
It's about addressing scarcity and meeting people's needs.
Okay, so there are a lot of different needs and a lot of different people and a lot of different ways to kind of organize all of that.
Right. There are many different economic systems that have been tried throughout history and are still in use today.
Many different systems, not just the ones that we hear about all the time.
Exactly. We could talk about anarchy or capitalism, colonialism, communism, corporatism,
Okay, slow down.
dirigism and distributism,
Wow.
feudalism, hydraulic despotism,
I may need a bigger whiteboard.
inclusive democracy, market economy, mercantilism, mutualism,
This is amazing.
national syndicalism network economy, non-property system palace economy,
Okay.
participatory economy, potlatch, progressive utilization theory,
Whoa.
proprietism resource-based economy,
Okay, so there's a lot.
social credit, socialism, statism, workers, self-management.
Okay, so we are not going to be able to get through all of those.
No, we can't possibly cover all of them in this deep dive.
But I think it's a really good illustration of just how many different ways there are to think about organizing an economy.
Yes, and how complex these issues can be.
So we're going to zoom in on a couple of those and kind of go deeper into them.
Capitalism and socialism.
Right.
Yeah.
But before we do that, we were talking about the difference between political systems and economic systems.
Yes, a crucial distinction.
Can you just kind of clarify that for us again? Because I know a lot of people get those two things mixed up.
Absolutely. So, while they're closely related, they are distinct. A political system is all about governance and power,
Okay.
while an economic system is about resource allocation and production.
So one is about who makes the decisions,
Yes, and how those decisions are enforced.
and the other is about how we actually get stuff done.
Precisely. For example, you could have a country with a democratic political system where people vote for their leaders, but also a capitalist economic system where businesses are privately owned.
Right, like the United States.
Exactly.
Okay, so you can have kind of different combinations
You can indeed.
of those systems.
A country can have a socialist economic system and an authoritarian political system,
What?
or a capitalist economic system and a democratic political system.
Okay, so there's no one-to-one relationship between those two things.
Not at all.
They can mix and match.
They can and do.
That's super helpful. Thank you for clarifying that.
You're welcome.
So for this deep dive, we're going to zero in on capitalism and socialism.
Two of the most influential and debated systems today.
Yes, and I think a lot of you are really interested in the pros and cons of each of these systems.
Especially the downsides of unchecked capitalism and some of the successes of countries that have adopted more socialist policies.
Exactly. So before we get into those specifics, can we just start with some basic definitions?
Of course.
Like, what is capitalism? What is socialism? How are they different?
Okay, so in the simplest terms, capitalism is an economic system where private individuals or corporations own the means of production.
Okay, so that means like the factories, the land, the resources that are needed to
Yeah.
make things.
Yes, and the goal of these private owners is to generate profit.
So it's all about making money.
In a way, yes, by selling goods and services in a competitive market.
Okay, what about socialism?
So socialism is a bit different in socialism. The means of production are either owned collectively by society as a whole
Okay.
or controlled by the government.
So it's not about individuals or companies owning those things.
Right. The idea is to distribute wealth more equally and ensure that everyone's basic needs are met.
So not just focusing on profit.
Exactly. The goal is social well-being rather than individual gain.
Okay, so I think I'm starting to see the fundamental difference here.
Good.
One is about private ownership and profit,
Yes.
and the other is about shared ownership and meeting everyone's needs. So now, you mentioned earlier that you were specifically interested in understanding the downsides of unchecked capitalism.
Right.
So can you elaborate on that? What are some of the potential problems that can arise when capitalism is left completely to its own devices?
Well, one major issue is income inequality.
Go.
Since the focus is on maximizing profit, those who own the means of production often end up accumulating a disproportionate share of the wealth.
So basically, the rich get richer.
In a way, yes, and those who don't own capital might struggle to keep up.
Right, and that can lead to all sorts of social problems.
Exactly. Lack of access to healthcare and education, increased crime and instability.
Yeah, it makes sense if the gap between the haves and the have-nots gets too big.
It can create tension and unrest.
Right. Are there any other downsides to this kind of unfettered capitalism?
Another big one is market failure.
Market failure. What does that mean?
So sometimes the pursuit of profit can lead to actions that are harmful to society as a whole. For example, companies might pollute the environment to cut costs, even though that damages everyone's health in the long run.
Or they might engage in risky financial practices.
Exactly. That could lead to economic crises like the one we saw back in 2008.
Right. So it's sometimes the market needs some guardrails
Some regulation and ethical considerations are definitely needed.
to make sure it doesn't kind of go off the rails and hurt people.
Precisely.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But you were also interested in learning about some successes of socialist policies.
Yes.
So can you tell me a bit more about that? What are some of the things that stand out to you in terms of how socialist policies have been beneficial in certain countries?
Well, one area where socialist policies have been undeniably successful is in providing universal health care.
Okay.
Countries like Canada and many in Europe have systems where everyone has access to medical care,
Right.
regardless of their ability to pay.
Yeah, I've always found those systems fascinating.
It removes a lot of the stress and worry that people in more market-driven healthcare systems often face.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So everybody gets the care they need.
Exactly, and it leads to a healthier population overall.
Okay. What else?
Another great example is public transportation.
Yeah.
Many European cities have invested heavily in affordable and efficient public transportation networks.
Right. I've definitely noticed that when I've traveled to Europe.
It not only reduces traffic congestion and pollution, but also makes it easier for people to get around.
Makes cities more livable.
Exactly. And it's more equitable because it benefits everyone regardless of their income level.
Okay, so those are some really interesting examples of how socialist policies can actually work well.
Yes. When implemented thoughtfully, they can create a more equitable and even healthier society.
So it seems like there's this kind of tension between these two systems.
There is.
Unfettered capitalism can lead to some serious issues.
Like inequality and market failure.
But socialist policies can also create a more just and caring society.
Exactly.
It's a lot to think about.
It
And it
is.
seems like a lot of countries are trying to find some sort of middle ground.
Yes, most countries don't operate on purely capitalist or socialist models.
Right, they have what's called a mixed economy.
Exactly, combining elements of both.
So it's not like black and white, it's more of a spectrum.
Precisely.
Okay, I think that's a really good place to pause for now.
Sounds good.
We've covered a lot of ground, and I want to give you all some time to digest all of this information about capitalism and socialism.
And how they might work together.
Yeah, that mixed economy idea has me really intrigued.
We'll delve into that more in the next part.
So stay tuned for that, but for now, just take a moment and think about what we've discussed so far.
What are your initial thoughts on this capitalist-socialist comparison?
And we'll be back soon to explore those mixed economies in more detail.
Welcome back. I'm glad we can pick up this conversation about these economic systems.
Me too.
And as we were saying before the break, most real-world economies aren't purely capitalist or purely socialist.
Right, it's more like a spectrum.
Exactly. They exist on a spectrum.
And that mixed economy thing,
Yes, the mixed economy.
that has me really intrigued.
It's a very popular approach.
Is it like finding the perfect balance between the two?
That's the idea.
Like a Goldilocks situation.
In a way, yes, it's about harnessing the dynamism and innovation that we often see in capitalist systems,
Okay.
but also mitigating the potential downsides.
It's like the inequality.
Exactly, the inequality and the market failures.
So it's like you get the good stuff from capitalism, but you try to kind of soften the blow of the bad stuff.
Right. You want to create a system where individual initiative can thrive,
Okay.
But there's also a safety net to ensure that everyone benefits from economic growth.
Not just the people at the top.
Precisely.
And how does that work in practice?
Well, the mix can vary quite a bit from one country to another.
Okay, so there's no one-size-fits-all mixed economy.
Not at all.
No.
Some countries lean more towards free markets with light regulation,
Okay.
while others prioritize a strong welfare state and more government intervention in the economy.
Okay, so it's like each country kind of has to figure out their own recipe.
Exactly, based on their own unique context and priorities.
Can you give us some examples of these mixed economies in action?
Sure, the Scandinavian countries, Denmark, Sweden, Norway,
Okay.
they're often held up as examples of successful mixed economies.
Yeah, I've heard good things about them.
They have thriving private sectors.
Okay, so they have capitalism.
Yes, but they also have very comprehensive social safety nets.
Like what kind of stuff?
Things like universal health care, generous parental leave policies, and free or heavily subsidized education.
Wow, that sounds amazing.
It is a lot of people point to those countries as models for how to create a more just and equitable society.
But how do they pay for all that?
Well, citizens in those countries do pay higher taxes
Okay.
compared to countries with more laissez-faire economic systems.
Right.
But they see those taxes as an investment in their collective well-being.
I see.
They're essentially pooling their resources to make sure that everyone has access to essential services.
Regardless of their income or their background.
Ex-
That's a really different way of thinking about it.
It is, and it's worth noting that those countries consistently rank among the happiest and most prosperous in the world.
Interesting. So higher taxes, but a happier and healthier society.
That seems to be the case in those countries.
And what about other examples? Are there other countries that have kind of found that balance?
Canada is another good example.
Canada. Okay.
They also have a universal healthcare system and a strong social safety net,
Okay.
but they also have a very vibrant market economy and a lot of international trade.
So they've kind of figured out a way to do both.
Right, to combine social responsibility with economic competitiveness.
It seems like it must be tricky to find that balance, though.
It is. It's a delicate balancing act.
What are some of the potential downsides of these mixed economies?
Well, one challenge is finding that optimal balance between government intervention and free market forces.
Okay.
Too much regulation can stifle innovation and economic growth, but too little can leave people vulnerable to those market failures we talked about earlier.
So it's about finding that sweet spot
Exactly.
where you have enough regulation to protect people,
Yes,
but not so much that it stifles the economy.
precisely.
That does sound tricky.
And that balancing act can become even more challenging in today's globalized economy.
Right, with things changing so quickly.
Yes, globalization, technological advancements, automation.
It's a lot to keep up with.
It is, and all of those things can disrupt traditional economic models and create new challenges for policymakers.
So mixed economies sound good in theory,
They can be very effective.
but they're not a silver bullet.
No system is perfect.
Are there any other potential downsides we should be aware of?
Well, one risk is bureaucratic inefficiency.
What does that mean?
So when the government plays a larger role in the economy,
Okay.
there's always the potential for red tape, slow decision-making, and even corruption.
Right, so it's really important to have transparency
Yes.
and accountability in those systems
Absolutely. A robust democracy with strong checks and balances is essential.
to make sure that the government is actually serving the people.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've talked about the potential benefits and the potential downsides of mixed economies.
It's a complex issue with a lot of different factors to consider.
It really is, and it makes me wonder if any single economic system can truly solve all of society's problems.
That's a great question.
Like, is there a perfect system out there?
That's something that economists and philosophers have been debating for centuries.
I bet.
And to be honest, I don't think there's a simple answer.
Yeah, human societies are so complicated.
They are, and our needs and desires are constantly evolving.
So what might work well in one context?
Might fail miserably in another.
Right, so it's not about finding a magic bullet solution,
No, it's about constantly adapting and experimenting.
trying to find the best approach for the specific challenges that we face.
Exactly, and that's where informed citizens like you come in. By understanding the strengths and weaknesses of different economic systems, you can participate in these crucial conversations about how to shape our economic future.
Like that.
You can advocate for policies that promote fairness, sustainability, and opportunity for all.
So it's not just about like understanding the theory.
No,
It's about using that knowledge to actually make a difference.
precisely.
Okay, I'm feeling a little bit more empowered now.
Good. That's the goal.
Like, I can actually do something.
Knowledge is power.
Well said. I think that's a really good note to end on.
I agree.
We've covered a lot of ground today.
We have from the basics of capitalism and socialism to the complexities of mixed economies.
And I hope all of you listening feel a little bit more equipped to navigate this complex world of economics.
It's a fascinating subject and one that affects all of our lives.
But keep asking questions, keep learning, and keep engaging in the conversations that shape our world.
Well said.
Until next time, stay curious.